Hello and welcome back to part 3 in this Porsche 911 Carrera engine fix series. This car does not run like a Porsche should. We found out that it had some pretty serious engine issues mechanically. So in part 2, we discovered this. Cylinder head number 5 had a major leak on the exhaust valve. So I have since taken all the cylinder heads off to be completely rebuilt. I have also disassembled a lot of the intake system to have a lot of pieces replated, like the fuel rails and some of the clamps and so forth. Also the ends of the fuel lines. So these are the original fuel lines that came new with the car. These are from 1986 or 1985. So I've taken the factory ends off and having them replated, they will go to a hose rebuilder to replace the rubber bits. This is what is hard and cracked. I had done another video on this topic with a different 3.2 engine. So you can click up here in the right corner for that video if you're curious how that works. I've also received this big box of parts here, mostly with gaskets required to finish the top end rebuild of this Porsche Carrera 3.2 liter engine. Chain cover gaskets, valve cover gaskets, new chain ramps. This is actually for the transmission. New intake spacers and gaskets. Oil tubes, oil cooler, new rear main seal, hood struts. These are also for like some of the sensors and things related to the cam, and new oil tubes. I also received this new sound pad and we'll be installing that. These often fail. It's probably going to be another week till the heads are finished, but in the meantime, I'm going to put as many of the new parts on as I can. And unfortunately, like doing engine rebuilds, it's mostly about cleaning. You spend most of your time cleaning the parts, checking the parts. This one is going to get a little messy. Stay tuned. Let's get going on just kind of cleaning this area. Unless you have all this removed, I don't really like power washing. There's just a lot of things you can damage with it, so I'm not going to do it. Looking for things that are cracked like this fitting. This is one of the vents for the smog control system. But these kind of things can cause, vacuum leaks and so forth. So I'll see if I can buy a new one of these. Here's what I'm doing. I have Super Clean and it's pretty non-toxic, I guess. I'm not getting asphyxiated in the engine bay. It's pretty minor and I'm not using a lot of it. Mostly what I'm doing is I'm wetting the surface with water. Then I spray a little bit of Super Clean on there. And then I'm just going after it with these nylon brushes. So these are black bristles. These are white bristles. So rather than using very toxic chemicals in the engine bay, I'm cleaning them here in my ultrasonic cleaner. So I just drop them in a much stronger solvent. Here's a little toothbrush, and then this is going in the ultrasonic cleaner. Basically, this will clean my brushes, and then I start over again. And I'm done this now probably 2-3 times. And the towels, I'm using the towels to, clean up the residue too. It's coming off the bottom of the car. So this is like sand and crap that really should come off the car. It's part of the maintenance. You shouldn't have that stuff in the fenders because it's just going to cause rust. So try to get that out of there if you can. And if it's oily, like on the other side, the oil tank, that probably is good for keeping it from rusting. But this road grime, which is basically just dirt and sand, actually holds moisture. Here's what the engine bay looks like now. It is pretty clean. The factory glue is still here. There's no point in removing that. That would be a nightmare. It's going to get covered up with a new sound pad. The wires have been, kind of cleaned for the most part. A little bit more maybe to do on those, but all the connectors have been cleaned out. The pins have been checked. I actually put a little bit of dielectric grease in there too. And then to clean the wires, I'm not sure if it's paint or the original factory Cosmoline or if it's just dirt and grime, but this Turtle Wax label and sticker remover basically dissolves whatever sticky stuff is on the wire sheath. So it comes pretty clean. It looks nice. Here's a little remnant of what was left on there. So that wax and grease remover or label remover kind of softens up that gunky stuff and really cleans up the wiring so you have this nice gray sleeve. That's the way it's supposed to look. Used, contact cleaner inside these guys. This is like a factory part number on that harness. So it's pretty much untouched. These are a lot of the original hoses. This is a pretty original car. It's debatable whether or not a clean car runs better than a non-clean car, but I think it does. Plus, it's just gonna last a lot longer. The other thing I'm doing while I'm in here is this is cavity coater, and I'm spraying this into all the seams. Anywhere there's overlapping metal, I'm just kind of squirting this in here, and this is displacing some of the water, and it's also preserving the seams from rusting. So like right up here, we just, we don't want to overdo it, but we want it to, see how it creeps into that seam? It's like a penetrating oil, but it doesn't really dry. It just goes in the seams, and I wipe it off with a paper towel, and this is one of the ways to protect these cars from rusting. Once this gets inside the cavity, it starts to creep around. It can actually go uphill. So when you drive the car, you hit a bump, this material can just coat the inside of the cavities. That's what it's for. I also cleaned at the level down below. I did notice that these motor mounts look to be new. They don't need to be replaced. The shocks are recently replaced. These came from the red car actually. And I'm also going to disconnect the fuel line. There's one more piece of rubber right here that I need to replace this rubber. So this is another, I don't know if there's a date code on this one, but I'm pretty sure it's the original fuel line. So it's a hard line from about there all the way over to where it goes into the tunnel. So now's the time to break those connections loose. We'll take these connectors off and we'll just pull it off and get that rubber part rebuilt. Yeah, I struggled getting this heater valve off. It has, 3 studs in the body, and there's this kind of clear gasket. This lower one was rusted on, and I really didn't want to break this off because this is part of the car. So I ended up having to heat it with the torch, and I, tried not to singe anything too much, but there is a little damage on the undercoating here. It doesn't go through, it's just a little lumpy. I haven't cleaned it yet, so I'll wire brush this. And then this AC hose is getting replaced anyways, so I didn't even bother removing it. I just went ahead and heated the nut so it was red, pulled it off, it's fine. I needed to take this off, one, because it really needs repair. But 2, I need to get to these fuel lines, and the only way to get these fuel lines off is to bend these tabs back and pull off the retainer. That's the one that leads all the way over to here, which is a rubber line on the end. The rubber needs to be replaced. The hard line itself is actually okay. So I'm gonna take it to the hose shop like the other ones and just have the rubber bit replaced. But that does involve removing the entire line from the car. And it goes all the way up here, almost to the tunnel. These AC lines are original too. So here's a 911 part number. So these are obviously old age and also not going to work with R134. There's also another set of clamps right there. So the lines are very well secured to the car with these plastic blocks. There's another one behind the cruise control motor. I've already loosened that one off and taken it off. And this car has the automatic heat option. So this has a small white wire that I think is a temperature sensor. So I'll have to figure a way to either unplug it from inside or remove it from the actual valve. I'm not sure how that's supposed to work, but it looks like I can see it in there. It protrudes into the valve probably, 15, 20 millimeters. The other side came off pretty easily, so that was no problem. Luckily, the nuts weren't rusted on, but that one was also in need of repair, so I removed both sides. Okay, what I've learned is that the valve is the same, but there's this extra duct that has the sensor element in it. So you can see there's a tiny little probe in there. Not sure if it's an airflow probe or a temperature probe, but whatever it is, I can probably try to reuse this if I can just, clean it in place and repaint it and just, see if it works. I don't know. It looks like it was normally not painted. It looked like it was normally just galvanized or zinc plated. Even though it's really crusty, it does still move. And the inner seal, which is like a Teflon plate, actually seems to be working. So good job for lasting this long, but I'm gonna replace you. And it's kind of nice, these axles are sealed. So there's no contaminants or grinding dust going into these CV joints, which is better than the 915 ones. I actually like that. These axles are beefier though. And there's no disconnect on the wheel side. It's just one connection. It goes all the way out to the hub, the spline. So I was able to separate that fuel fitting. It was very difficult to break it loose. The threads look nice on that, but it was on pretty tight. There is an 11 millimeter across the flats, like kind of a flat spot there, which you can't put a lot of torque on that. So if it wasn't for these pliers, these Nipex pliers that like when you squeeze it, it keeps the jaws parallel. I was able to really grab it and break the nut loose and got the fuel line off. So whatever. Luckily, it didn't damage the plastic lines that go through the tunnel. I don't anticipate replacing those. So now I have the line loose and I got it loose from all these brackets, but it's still, hard to maneuver it out of the way. So there's these two tabs. There's two more tabs right there. There's a big loop and a big giant piece of foam here that's kind of in the way. So I'm gonna have to kind of move that a little bit and potentially have to take the brake booster line off just to get the fuel line out. There's also some tabs up there. Got that off. So unless you cut through this hardline with the zip tool, there's no reason why you can't just put new rubber on there. You can also look inside the tubing and see if there's any evidence of rust in there. This doesn't have any. Definitely not red color like rust would be, so this one can absolutely be rebuilt. It's less trouble than trying to source one of these new and have all the bends in the right place. I finished cleaning the bottom, especially where the transmission goes. It didn't go to the same level of clean brushes, but I got all the, the grime and the grease and the neglect. Luckily, I haven't found any areas where the undercoating is failing or rusting or any problems with the car. This car is aging pretty well. The only problem I found potentially is this sway bar bracket has been welded on. This is the aftermarket one or updated one. It has a couple raw welds here. I think it was painted black in the past, but that was cheap paint. It's not faring very well. So I will mix up some epoxy primer and brush it on and make sure that those welds are protected. Same thing on this side. You can see I didn't do this, but these are some kind of crappy welds and exposed metal where it just was probably hit with a spray can, which isn't really good enough for the bottom of the car. You kind of need to get several coats of epoxy primer on there so it won't rust again. And then there's like hidden cavities inside here, which I'm spraying with cavity wax. Also in the corners up there, cavity wax. Any seams like up here where the seat pans are, I'm spraying that stuff. Even if it doesn't go in, it's at least worth a try. The area is pretty well seam sealed by the factory, so everything is still intact. All the factory seam sealers looking pretty good. You can see they use some blue like RTV kind of stuff here for the electrical harness. I cleaned up the suspension arms a little bit too. This is the original Cosmoline coating, and this is what I thought might have been on some of the wiring harness. I think the factory just kind of sprayed the bottom of the car with it. I'm not really sure. You can see how it's pretty thick in some areas, kind of falling off on some areas. Eventually it gets cracked, but it's an aluminum protectant. It's pretty good. I'm gonna leave as much of it on as I can. Also, there are some suspension bushings here. I'm not gonna do it on this round. I can get this off with the transmission in it, so maybe we'll do that on a separate project. I found a little crack in the emergency brake line or sheathing. Probably isn't preventing it from working, but we can add that to the list. I know the emergency brake needs to be adjusted. All this is super loose. Probably needs new shoes or something. It's finally time to put on some new parts. There's a big difference between the new one and the old one. So this one, super easy. This one can hardly move. Ugh. Yeah, this one's way stiffer. I'm gonna wait to put the new one in until we fit the sound pad. This is the deluxe sound pad from App Biz. And so it has two sides. This is kind of a closed cell foam side, and this side has a bit of a skin to it, but the stiffness of the pad is much more robust than the factory one. This is the one that came out of the red car. It's been sitting outside, but you can see how it just gets old and cracked and basically fails. And the internal foam is really like a soft foam, easily squishable. It's not very dense at all. So this is often falling down or coming into little powdery pieces, gets sucked in the engine and just causes a bunch of dirt. In my opinion, I would not buy the Porsche part. I would 100% buy the App Biz one. I'm pretty happy with the way it goes in without glue. It seems to fit pretty well. So this part is still not all the way up against the shelf. So it does need, I think, a little bit of glue right here, but it won't need much. It fits pretty nice in these tabs. I got to kind of fix that tab, a little crazy. But the cutouts for the strut seem to be perfect. The fit on the end is almost ideal. A little bit of a gap right there, but I mean, it's small. Fits great all the way up around the hinges. This side is, you know, pretty good as well. AC hose is clear. A little bit of a gap right there, nothing major, but it really is pretty nice. See the slit right there. So we can glue the edges, probably like a tab of glue right here, and then some glue here in the center, and it's gonna stay hopefully forever. Remember, the shiny side goes towards the engine. Should be able to wipe it down without having foam, you know, rain everywhere. Now, I'm not gonna glue it in right now. I gotta get that other fuel line in, and this is pretty tight where it goes down in that hole. I may have to take this corner up to get that fuel line back in. This is the supply line. The return line uses these two tabs. If I was to glue it on the back, I would probably never get the fuel line in. That goes in those two bolts right there. All right, that is now installed, looking pretty good. It is holding itself up, which is awesome. Seems to want to be right there. And then on the down, anywhere below here, it drops. But that's good, that's all we need, just keep it up. At a time this week, cleaning and preparation and, you know, taking apart that heater valve. It's a little bit more time consuming than I expected. I had hoped to get to the transmission, kind of get that cleaned up too. But that's all I have time for. Heads should be back next week. I will be in the garage probably each night, just cleaning one or two pieces. Engine tins, intake manifold, all that stuff. I'll be working on it and I'll just show you the results because I know it's not that fun to watch. But thank you guys for being here. Happy New Year, and we'll see you next year.